Welcome to CivilNet. My guest today from Southern California is Professor Nubar Hovsepian, a specialist in Palestinian issues. Professor Hovsepian, thank you for joining us on CivilNet.
My pleasure. It's good to be with you.
I was going to introduce you as either a political scientist or a historian, and I didn't know which to do. What do you think I should say?
I study politics with a historical context.
So which one are you?
I'm both. I am formally study political science, but I study politics. Forget the word science.
Because it isn't.
It's not.
Especially if we're talking about the modern Middle East.
Well, about talking about anything, about New York City politics, that's not science.
That's true. Talk to me about Armenian politics.
Exactly.
Professor Hovsepian, you're a historian, a political scientist, a specialist in Middle Eastern affairs. You're Palestinian. And what has always amazed me about Armenian Palestinians is that they are incredibly passionate about the issues that engage them as Palestinians, issues of displacement, issues of unresolved justice, and all of that. How do you explain that? That you have this huge investment in Palestinian issues rather than, I don't know, in what other issues, you know, Greenpeace, environment, Armenia, something else. How come?
Well, I'll relay a story to you. My friend Kevorkin Klian, who used to work on the Armenian Patriarchy in Jerusalem.
Who is still known as the guy in Jerusalem who knows everything there is to know about Armenians.
That's right. Well, he came to Armenia a few times. He said, I loved it, I felt at home, but my real home was Jerusalem. And he went back to Jerusalem, right? And I think, you know, I grew up in Cairo, you know, for all things. So my experience is Cairo, is Beirut, etc. You cannot take the Armenian out of us, but we're not limited by the Armenian connection either, right? We are both local and global citizens simultaneously, and we cannot separate the two. And for the Palestinian issue, remember, for the Palestinian issue, because it is an issue that is still unresolved, that has no resolution in sight, and therefore the intensity of the attachment to the question becomes even greater. It is an endangered species sort of thing.
This still unresolvedness, there was a little while there about 2 years ago with the UN observer status issue that perhaps something was going to move forward. Is something moving forward? No,
absolutely not. The UN issue is, to me, a useful front, but as long as you're on the ground, you're losing your ability to have a say as to what happens to your to the area over which you want sovereignty, then any victories at the UN are meaningless. That is, they are kind of moral victories that do not reflect themselves politically or on the ground. That is, Palestinians have less access and less control to any of the territory of historic Palestine now than they did 10 years ago.
You know, given that reality, and I'm, you know, clearly not an expert, I'm just a passionate follower. Given that reality, the two-state solution idea has never made any sense to me.
Well, you know, look, any idea makes sense if the political will to implement it is there. Clearly, the political will, both locally and internationally, is not there to push through a two-state solution. Now, is it a historical solution? I suppose not. But I think the same can be applied. I mean, Armenians of my generation, if you told them that their national resolution would be in current-day Armenia, they would have kind of laughed you off, especially Beiruti Armenians or Cairo Armenians, right? So, but now realities sometimes force one to accept interim solutions. If there is a real possibility for a two-state solution, so be it. I think increasingly, given what Israel is doing on the land, it has become almost impossible.
You teach at Chapman University in Southern California. Has it become any easier to talk about Palestinian issues, Palestinian needs, Palestinian injustice than it has been for decades past. That's always a difficult topic in the US.
Yes, and I think it's easier because I think in many ways the Palestine question has a certain moral gravitas, and the Israeli position has become extremely vulgar. Vulgar in the sense that if you're not with me, you're against me. And I think the younger generation, especially among PhD students in the humanities and social sciences, don't accept that you cannot be critical of Israel, or do not accept the equation that being critical of Israel is being anti-Semitic. What a ludicrous claim. And I think because of that, precisely because of that, you had a talk a few weeks ago, and I was in New York in February with Judy Butler and Omar Barghouti over the whole question of the boycott campaign, the BDS campaign, at Brooklyn College of all places, and the president of Brooklyn College defended it against the gutless city council members who were trying to cancel it, right? So I think the atmosphere in the U.S. at large has changed. This does not mean that the Dershowitzes of the world at Harvard will not raise a stink about it. It just means that I think we have more space to articulate a position that is critical of domination and colonialism, which what Israel is today, and it gains acceptance on a wider scale than ever before. We have had some success in altering the cultural discourse.
And in making clear that recognition of the needs of one does not mean dismissing the injustices done to the other.
That's right. I mean, I'm finishing now a book on Edward Said. And one of the chapters in it is titled Edward Said's Palestine, Inclusion Without Domination. That's the whole idea, that inclusion means that all those who are part of the issue are part of the discussion to resolve it, not to the exclusion of one or over the other. And I think inclusion without domination captures more or less the type of discourse that is needed.
We have found as Armenians, and especially as Armenia, that when you are the junior partner in a conflict, that it's very hard to be able to defend your positions because the absence of information or the one-sided information is overwhelming. Is that a problem that the Palestinian advocates still suffer from?
I think to some extent that, but to a greater extent, and as I think Rashid Khalidi has argued in his latest book on deceit, American deceit, that the U.S. is not a broker. The U.S. is the defense attorney for the Israeli state. And in that sense, when you have the U.S., which is the only significant international power in this equation, then your chance to get a fair hearing on an international level to affect policy diminishes accordingly. It's U.S. policy, and U.S. policy is a complex set of power equations, right? So, yes, it is tough. The smaller you are, but the difference between Palestinians and Armenians is that Palestinians have been part of, say, the growth of the non-aligned movement in the UN, etc., right? That is, it was a cause célèbre. So in that sense, though Palestinians and Armenians are equal in terms of their size, in terms of peoples, but the Palestinian is a greater one simply because it has resonated in a period of time when the world was being decolonized, Palestine was being colonized. It grated against the sensibilities of the world. That's the only advantage Palestinians have, but it's not a great advantage because Israel continues to occupy most of the land.
Finally, do you want to say anything about Turkey's current position in this situation, this mess? Is it Palestine's friend? Is there reliability there?
No, I don't. Look, Turkey's positions, irrespective of who's in power, is based on geopolitics. Right? Their geopolitical interests. With a simple call of apology, now the Turkish government is back on bored with re-establishing its normal relations with Israel. So I don't think Turkey is going to go one way or the other, irrespective of the political regime. They are an ally of the U.S., and they are essentially representing themselves as a regional power, and that's what their interest is. Palestinians cannot rely on them. That's not what the Turks are about to do.
Well, on that not very happy note, let me say thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nubar Hovsepian of Chapman University in Southern California, and thank you for following us on CivilNet.